Hello and welcome to Eastern Roman History. I want to address a question that a subscriber asked about Constantine the Great. He asked, why did Constantine split up his empire among his sons when, through his life in the Tetrarchy, found that dividing Rome was bad? Firstly, what was the Tetrarchy? The Tetrarchy was the name of the political system of Diocletian, where 4 emperors, 2 senior Augusti and 2 junior Caesars ruled the empire together. In the west, Maximian ruled with Constantius I as Caesar, and in the east, Diocletian ruled with Gallienus as Caesar. Why was this? Simply put, this system had come about under Diocletian to effectively resolve the main political issue of the 3rd century crisis, an issue dubbed by modern historians the cycle of emperors. This cycle essentially meant that an emperor would go to meet an external threat. When they were gone, the usurper would rebel, take troops from the frontier, and then usurp the throne. The victor then had to return to the frontier, as the troops taken away to fight the civil war had allowed further enemies to penetrate into the empire, and then, while they were gone, another usurper rebelled, and this would happen over and over again. Had emperors divided the empire before, and were these successful? Roman emperors had divided the empire before and shared power. This practice was first started with Marcus Aurelius and his brother Lucius Verus in the 2nd century. In the 3rd century, Macrinus, Maximinus I, Philip the Arab, Decius, Trebonius Gallus, Valerian, Gallienus, Tacitus, and Carausius had all made their sons Caesar. This did 2 things. It clearly designated who was the emperor's heir, and it allowed them to keep an imperial presence in an area while the Augustus was away on campaign. This system developed further under Valerian, where the empire was effectively divided between Valerian, who ruled in the east, and his son Gallienus, who ruled in the west, with Valerian II, the son of Gallienus, on the Danube as an imperial presence. When Valerian was captured by Shapur I, Gallienus simply became senior Augustus and made his other son Solanus Caesar, Valerian II having already died. Through this system, Valerian and Gallienus managed to rule the empire through enormous external and internal pressure for 15 years, the longest reign of the 3rd century since the more stable Severan age. Often, it was sole rules that ended in disaster. For example, when Claudius II Gothicus died, the suddenness of his death meant the succession was disputed between his brother Quintillus and Aurelian, Claudius's right-hand man. Even if things were more stable, such as when Aurelian died and Tacitus took his place, Aurelian's lack of attention for the future meant that long-term stability was not restored until the reign of Diocletian. So why was the Tetrarchy special? Firstly, who was Diocletian? Diocles, as he was known before he became emperor, was an army commander who, following the death of Numerian, rebelled against Numerian's brother Carinus, who ruled in the west. After defeating and killing Carinus, Diocletian, in 285, made his best friend Maximian Caesar, sent him to put down the Bugaldae in Gaul. With the revolt of Carausius in 286, who declared himself emperor and occupied all of Roman Britain and modern Normandy, Diocletian made Maximian Augustus. In 293, Constantius and Galerius, who were praetorian prefects, were made Caesars. The Tetrarchy was special and seemed to work because of 3 reasons. Firstly, Diocletian could not rule the empire alone, as it was too large, and thus why Maximian was needed in the west. The creation of 2 more emperors seems to follow this trend towards a more efficient management of the empire, which is also reflected in Diocletian's administrative reforms, which saw provinces divided so that more people could focus on a smaller area. This way Constantius governed Gaul and Britain. Spain, Italy and Africa were ruled by Maximian, Galerius ruled the Balkans and Pannonia, and Diocletian ruled Anatolia, the Levant and Egypt. Secondly, succession. The emperors that divided the empire between themselves and another often found that when their counterpart died, they were sole ruler. This was the case with the Valerian Diarchy, which soon fell apart, as well as Carus and Numerian with Carausius. Initially, should Diocletian have died, then Maximian would take over as sole emperor. Once the Caesars were added, should either one of the emperors die, then there would still be 3 others ruling, and it would be a simple case of filling in the gap. This meant that the succession was more secure and far more difficult to break apart. Finally, the tetrarchs were all connected by marriage, making them all allied to each other and, in a sense, one interconnected dynasty. The success of this system can be shown in the few and relatively minor rebellions experienced from outside of the ruling dynasty for the entire life of the tetrarchy until the death of Constantine the Great. The abdication of Maximian and Diocletian and the peaceful succession of Constantius and Galerius was almost unheard of in the 3rd century. Finally, was dividing the empire bad? In my opinion, the short answer is no. Diocletian's tetrarchy effectively brought an end to the political issues of the crisis of the 3rd century because it tackled with the issue of succession and governing an empire the size of Rome's. An issue that emperors had tried and failed to truly solve for the better part of a century. Constantine and future emperors such as Valentinian I must have also realised that sole rule was no longer a viable means of governing the empire effectively, especially with fierce enemies such as the Sassanid Empire, the Goths, Germans, and Picts. Therefore, the reason why Constantine divided the empire among his sons may have been precisely because, through his long experience in the tetrarchy, of ruling with multiple emperors, that this system was ultimately good and the only viable approach to take. I have been your host, Daniel Maynard. I hope this answered your question, and this has been Eastern Roman History.